Good afternoon, everybody, and thanks for joining us for the kickoff of our CFES Brilliant Pathways webinar series, featuring guests from educational backgrounds, business, all with expertise. The goal being to help our students who are tuned in today to be successful in college and their career, whatever pathway they choose. Particularly excited about today's event because I got three people that I think really bring a lot of expertise on the ground through research. They've lived their lives helping students in various ways. Maria Daikomarb, who I went to high school with, actually has had. I'll let her talk. Each of them talk about their own pathway, but she went to UNH and then moved on and has worked in this space in North Carolina, Duke, Elon, UVM, and now she recently launched a similar center at Boston University. And Jadine Santos, a lot of you have seen before. She did a great VPR segment actually with our CEO Rick Dalton, and has I've been fortunate enough to visit the Mosaic Center, where she is the assistant director, and just to see the work that she's done there is it's inspiring. She'll bring a lot to the table. And then Matt Newland, who has been around in higher ed, consultant himself now. I'll let him talk about his background. He's from St. Louis. He's done work with Maria and has particular expertise in some issues that rural students face that I'll let him talk about. So could start with Maria, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself. And our students love to hear about how people got to where they are.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. So my name's Maria Erb, and I grew up in Vermont. I am a transracial adoptee. So my parents are from the Netherlands, so I had an immigrant experience, but I was adopted from South Korea as a baby, so I have no memory of being in South Korea. So imagine this, me on a dairy farm with cows, with a Dutch community all around me, and growing up in a conservative Christian household. And so that was really important for us to go to church twice a Sunday, and we were very engaged in our community. So I grew up in a very rural background, and college was never something that was of value within the community because it was very agriculturally based. And so the expectation was that you would marry one of the guys in the community, the farming community, and then have children live on the farm, and you repeat that for generations. For some reason, I knew that was not for me. And I was very fortunate in that my older sister, who she was the guidance secretary, so she was kind of like the administrative assistant in the guidance office of my high school, which was very small. There were only about 90 seniors in our class, so I always did well in school, but there was never any conversation about what will you do next. And I graduated second in my class, so I was salutatorian, and there was never really an encouragement. Like I felt like, oh, well, if I go to college, maybe I'll go to Champlain College, which at the time was only a 2-year institution. They weren't an institution that had a bachelor's degree. So I was like, well, maybe I'll do that. Like you thought more about, like, I could be a secretary. That was the term that they used back then. Or I could do accounting, like very practical things. And then one of my close friends, who was she was a year ahead of me, she decided to look at school. So she looked at UMass Amherst and UNH, and she was looking at the hotel and restaurant administration major. And both of us who were first gen were like, well, that seems like a good major. We would have a job when we're done with college, so why don't we pursue that? We had no clue. We had absolutely no clue what to do. So I ended up going to the University of New Hampshire, again, as a first gen student, having no idea what was going on. My sister was able to assist a little bit, but she herself did not go to college. So she just retired after 42 years in the same position in the high school. So she saw generations of high schoolers graduate and go off to college, but she would provide a lot of advice. So unbeknownst to me, I applied to the University of New Hampshire, and back then, way back in 1988, at that time, that was one of the most competitive times in admissions history to get into colleges. And I only applied there because I'm like, oh, well, why would I waste my money applying to other schools? So fortunately, I was admitted. I then I was Pell eligible, so I received the Pell Grant. And in some ways, over that first year, I received more, I think in the first 2 years, more money than the bill was. So I had a little bit of money left over. But as like a 17, 18-year-old, I didn't know that I had to save that money, to put it away for, expenses that would come up in books. And then just really not understanding the whole financial aid process. Years later, I understood that I didn't actually have to take out the loans that I took out. So fast forward, I finished my degree program, and I can tell you more about it later, but finished my degree program. But throughout that time, I learned that I could actually travel the country for free if I became an admissions counselor. So I worked in the admissions office, and I would give tours on campus to visitors, prospective students. I did that for 3 years, and that really, through that opportunity and having mentors in that office, they really helped me understand, oh, I could have a career in higher education and student affairs. I could have a job like them, and I can recruit students. I can travel the country because I never had an opportunity to do that. So I did that. And when I graduated, I decided, well, why don't I apply for a position at the University of Vermont as an assistant director of admissions? So I did that. I was there for 9 years in that position, and then worked for about 9 months in a grant program called the Women in Agricultural Network, which helped women and people of color start their own agriculturally based businesses. Because it was a grant program, the funding ran out. So fortunately, a position opened up for me as assistant to the dean in the Rubenstein School of Environment and Natural Resources. I didn't know anything about the environment, but I certainly learned a lot while I was there. And that was very exciting to understand all of the amazing scholars and research going on in the environment. So after that, I decided it was time to do something different. I went back to college, went back to grad school, or pursued a grad degree, because here's one of the things I always said, I'm never going to go to graduate school. Why would I go to graduate school? But I finally realized if I wanted to move up in my career, I needed to do that. So I was working full-time in the Alana Student Center, which was our center for students of color, which is now the Mosaic Center at the University of Vermont. And so I worked there and really loved the work in supporting, and throughout my whole career, supporting students who come from marginalized identities. So first gen, students of color, BIPOC students, LGBTQI+. So being able to work with students, I could see that this was my trajectory. And then after completing my degree, I decided I needed to get out of Vermont and actually see what else was out there. So went on for different positions at Elon University in North Carolina, Duke University, UNC Chapel Hill, or the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill, ended up at Boston University, where I'm now the inaugural director of the Newberry Center, which is a brand new center for first-gen undergrad, graduate, and professional students. So, so that's a very quick overview of my career. So I'll turn it back to you, John, and happy to answer any questions.
Thanks. Yeah, it's really interesting to hear everybody's pathway. And I know you knew Jadine when she was an undergrad, I believe.
Yes, so I did.
Yeah, I'll let Jadine take over there and kind of tell us where you went from there, or starting with Christopher Columbus, if you'd like.
Yeah, I can start way back when I went to high school. So I'm originally from the Bronx, New York. I come from a Puerto Rican family, or like a New Yorican family. No one in my family went to college. No one in my neighborhood went to college. It wasn't something that we discussed. It was basically go to high school and graduate, and like you're lucky enough to get a high school diploma. And like that was the goal. My parents always said, like, we think you go to college and put it out there. And I know I was interested in leaving the city. I wanted more for my life. My parents struggled. My dad always worked 2 jobs. My mom was always working night shifts. Like, so it was hard. And I know I didn't want that life for myself. I felt like I could do something, but I had no idea what I wanted to do. I just wanted something. And so like UVM, the University of Vermont, had a partnership with my high school. And it was the first year this partnership existed. And so I heard about it. They offered us a free trip to come to the campus and just check it out and see what we thought. And I immediately fell in love because it's what I thought college would look like in my mind. It was green, rolling hills, everything looked perfect and pristine. And I was away from the city and it was so quiet. And so I was like, all right, that's where I want to go. And I applied to a bunch of like city schools as well, which offered amazing financial aid packages. But I had a long talk with my family and I was like, I think this is what I want. And we figured we could afford it. And so I was able to go to UVM. And so I went to UVM. I was undeclared in the College of Arts and Sciences because, again, I had no idea what I wanted to study. And I just kept taking classes until I figured out something I liked, which ended up being sociology. It just was really interesting learning about our society and how we all interact with each other, and minored in psychology. And then afterwards, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, but college was really hard for me. And I struggled a lot as a first-gen student. I didn't have my parents or friends who I can talk to about this experience or ask for help and advice. No one to help me do my FAFSA. I mean, I was really on my own and just figuring it out. And it showed in my grades. Like I had some grades like that went down. I had some Fs mixed with some As. It was tough. And so like through that experience, I learned that I needed to rely on other people here who know how to like navigate the system. And that's how I ended up going into higher ed, because like towards my senior year, I was like, I think I want to be one of those people that help other students figure this out because this is hard. And so I knew I wanted to go into higher ed and didn't know how that was going to happen because grad school was definitely not an option for me after undergrad, mostly because I was done with school at that point. Like I was burnt out and tired. And so I ended up getting a position in the UVM admissions office and worked on diversity programming and partnership programs. And so I ended up working directly with the students who are coming from the high school I worked with, trying to bring them to come to UVM and check it out and do everything that I did. And it was a really great position, but after 3 years, I realized I wanted to help the students that were here, and I wasn't able to do that as much. So then I ended up going to the Alana Student Center, which is where I met Maria Erb. And so from there, I've been in the center for, I'm guessing it's like 17 years now. This is my 20-year like UVM anniversary. So I've been working here for 20 years, which is longer than I ever thought I'd be here. And so now I am working in the Mosaic Center for Students of Color, supporting our students and helping them like deal with all the challenges they have, especially the first year students, the first gen students, like they struggle the most just trying to figure out where they are. We are in a extremely predominantly white state. And so students who are coming from like cities who are just used to more like diversity, racial diversity, are shocked when they come into our campus, and it takes more time for them to warm up and adjust to being here and feeling like they belong. And so I spent a lot of time just kind of telling them, you belong here. This is your school as well. Yeah, and I think that's how my story is. I went to grad school as well, did it part-time, made it work for me. And same program as Maria, like it was just an amazing program where you can just go part-time, work full-time, and get all the experience you need to better serve our students. I think that's my story.
Thanks, Jaden. Yeah, that class was pretty significant, that initial class from Christopher Columbus and New York Times, did a big piece, and it was something that Rick's and CFES actually helped work on, and it's fascinating. You were really kind of ahead of the times experiencing that, but now giving back to like your former self, it's pretty obviously meant a lot to you. And then Matt, we'd love to hear a little bit. I know you've done a lot of work with the Center for First Gen Student Success and some other organizations and universities, so love to hear about your pathway.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me today. Hello, everyone. My name is Matt Newland. Like my fellow panelists, like many of you, also first generation college student. So didn't have a pathway in front of me. I live in St. Louis. I grew up in Missouri, grew up in a rural working class community about an hour outside of St. Louis. And so I didn't have a pathway. College wasn't, there was no negative ideas about college. It wasn't something that we were dissuaded from doing, my family, but no one in my family had done it except my stepdad's half brother had gone to college. So it just wasn't discussed. It was just sort of, if you want to do it, great, but if you don't, that's fine too. I knew I wanted to go to college from early high school. I fell in love with, I was a theater kid, I was in drama, and I fell in love with sort of the romantic, JD, as you said, the kind of the college camp, like what you expect a college campus to be, sitting in the quad. So I knew I wanted to go to college, I wanted to learn and study, but my trajectory changed. So one of the things I've discovered in the last couple of years, kind of self-reflecting on my life, is so much of my major things that have happened have just been happenstance or just sheer luck that have changed the trajectory. So I had been accepted to 3 Bachelor of Fine Arts programs. I decided to do one. It was a private institution. And in the summer after I graduated, right before college started, my parents told me they just didn't have the money to make it work, or if they did, it would really, really stretch them thin because they would be taking out a lot of Parent Plus loans, which I'm sure is a concern for a lot of students who are here today. And I couldn't do that to my parents. I didn't think it was the right move. So I ended up staying in St. Louis, doing community college for a semester, and then transferring to University of Missouri, Mizzou, because that's where my girlfriend was at the time. So I followed her up there. Thankfully, because it was an amazing experience. I did a double major in English and communication. Kind of the joke with Mizzou is everyone goes there to be a journalism major. 2/3 of us quit after the first semester, and I was definitely one of the 2/3. So again, just sort of happenstance that I stumbled into the double major. But JD, and like you, I also struggled academically because I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to talk to professors. I didn't know how to study. I didn't know how to prepare for exams that were completely different styles than anything I'd seen in high school. And then I graduated, really didn't know what I wanted to do, was sort of floundering. I didn't have a clear pathway because there weren't quote unquote careers in my family. My parents owned a small business, a couple of UPS stores, formerly mailboxes, et cetera. And so it was very, you just sort of find an occupation. You didn't find a career. I fell in love with higher ed and fell in love with college as an undergrad. And so very quickly I realized I want to go back to college, but like help students. I didn't know admissions was one way to get in. I actually got into higher ed through financial aid, which is uncommon, but I had a connection with it. I graduated with just under $30,000 in student loans. So I was a Pell Grant student, a work study all 4 years. So I was a financial aid student. I understood it. I knew what students went through. And so it translated very easily for me as a financial aid counselor. And then I spent about 12 years in financial aid as a counselor, as an assistant director, as a director. I eventually wanted to get out, and it took a few years for me to pivot my career. And again, through happenstance, I found an amazing position at College Advising Corps, which is a national nonprofit college access organization, very similar to Brilliant Pathways, as director of rural initiatives. It was a brand new position, a brand new initiative they had. And I was able to work with students here in Missouri and across the country, helping increase college enrollment. That again, a position that just happened to be created right when I was looking for jobs. I was very fortunate, and it took my career in a whole new direction, to where now I'm not really sure where I'm going next. That job, unfortunately, I lost during the pandemic. The grant money was pulled. So I've been, not working full time this last year, but doing a lot of really cool consulting work that has developed into more than full time, where I'm working with the Center for First Gen Student Success. I'm working as a dissertation advisor at a private university for doctoral students. I'm doing projects with colleges and universities. And I've just kind of entered this new area that I never thought I would be in, but it's giving me a chance to really pursue my passion and continue focusing on rural students, getting things out there, getting messages to students, helping first gen students. And it's just been a whirlwind pathway, but it's gotten me to where I am today.
Thanks. Yeah, thanks everybody. It's such interesting personal experiences, but then now the work you're doing informed through your own experience and then as professionals. We have a question that I think is a good place to start. So we have a lot of students on right now from urban areas, some from rural, and we have a student from Beekmantown, which is just outside of Plattsburgh. So we work with a lot of upstate New York schools that are fairly rural. He says, coming from a rural school, what can help me be successful in a larger college? And I'll let you guys answer. I think it's one thing that's interesting. I know we look at the numbers and you see there's approaching 40% students dropping out. And CFES, we've helped 100,000 students get to college, but for a while we weren't paying attention to what was happening once they got there. And so we said, look, a lot of them aren't making it. Why is that? So with our students today, I'd be interested to hear why you think some aren't making it, what tools and things you could give them or advice you'd have so they can make it when they get there. I mean, we've had students go just from New York to UVM, 40 miles as the crow flies, and they were intimidated and didn't know how to, they ended up coming home. A couple were successful. So we're really, any advice you would have to this particular question, but also for urban students in general. Anybody can jump in, feel free.
Sure, I can start out. One of the most important things that I share with students is that college is different in the fact that you have to advocate for yourself. So I think for those of you in high school, you're kind of, you're on this schedule, like you have to go to these particular classes, you have to show up. College is a whole other world where you might get penalized if you don't show up, or you might not go to class and you may not be missed. So that's one of those things that you really need to be sure that you're aware of, and you have to ask for what you need. And I know as a first-gen student myself, it's really, that's one of the hardest things I've ever had to, the hardest habits I've had to break out of is you need to ask for help, because you will be surprised by how many doors are open to you if you ask for help. I think it's important that you find out whatever college or university that you're applying to, that you ask if there's a first generation center or program on your college campus you're interested in, because there are staff like, people like Matt and Jadine and myself and others across college campuses where this work means a lot to us, and we want to support first-gen students. And so there are people on campus who care about you and care about your well-being. So by finding out, does your school have a center, or do they have a TRIO program like the Student Success, I think it's Student Support Services, SSS program, which helps students from low-income backgrounds or students of color or first gen, find out if you have those connections or some kind of a program that would be specifically for you as a first gen or low-income background student. Learning and writing centers are really important. Engage in those, because we know statistically that the term is called continuing generation students. So students whose parents or guardians or caregivers do have bachelor's degrees, students who come from that kind of a family, statistically, they'll take more advantage of these centers to assist with tutoring or writing skills, time management, those things. That's an important thing to engage with. And one thing before I hand it over to Jadine and Matt, what you said, Matt, about like having to learn how to study, that's why I highly encourage those writing centers or learning centers. I failed classes in my first semester. I was on academic probation in my first semester of college. I was horrified, having been a straight A student in high school, I couldn't believe I found myself in that position. But once I had to teach myself at that time, I had to teach myself how to study because I didn't know how to study. So that's why the great thing is many college campuses now, they understand that. And so they have these resources available to you. So I'll turn it over to Jadine and Matt.
The first thing I'm thinking is you need to make the college experience personal to you. So find places on the campus where you feel comfortable, where you can just like relax and you can study, and find people who you can talk to. Like there's pockets of people everywhere. So it could be your faculty, and I would start there, like get to know your faculty, make sure they know who you are. It's like really easy as a first-gen student to just want to kind of blend in the class and not be seen, especially if you're struggling, you're kind of like, I'm here, but not really here. Like you should be talking to your professor before the class or after the class, sending them emails, going to office hours. That's like the number one thing is I always say when they take the grades out and they're starting to grade people at the end of the semester, they're like, oh yeah, this person came by office hours a few times. Yeah, they have a C-, but how about I just give them a C because they tried, and so that happens. So make it a personal experience and definitely ask for help. Like that is the number one piece of advice. Like talk to your RA if you're having trouble making friends in your hall, see if they can introduce you to other students. Get involved. Like if you're interested in like some kind of club, join the club, check out the meetings, just become part of the campus community because you belong there. It's part of your community too. And so it might feel like you're an imposter in this campus. Like I don't really belong here, but you do. You got into the school just like everybody else. You worked your butt off in high school. You deserve to be there. So you just have to make it work for you. Yeah, those are really important things for like coming from a rural area. And then I say from an urban area, that all same applies. Like your world's gonna be big and it's gonna feel really small, I think, going to a school, although it's, it might be huge. It could be like 15,000 students. That could be tiny if you're coming from a high school that had 5,000 students. And so from there, it's really just like find your pockets where you feel comfortable again and those other students and like reach out for help and talk to your family. And they get homesick. So like make sure you're talking to them and your friends from home, like they'll just make you feel more grounded in that experience while you're away from home. But at the same time, like be adventurous and challenge yourself to do something different and new, do something that scares you every day. And that eventually, like, it's going to feel like your home and you're going to feel comfortable there.
Yeah, I agree with everything Jadine and Maria said. Absolutely everything they said is accurate. And I would, with Jadine, I agree with the community, especially Steve, and thank you for asking this question. I know for rural students, especially finding a community on campus, since so often rural students are coming from very close-knit communities, finding your community on campus is so important, like Jadine said. So whether it's the people in your residence hall, whether it's the people in your first class, or, I mean, like she said, join a robotics club, get involved in student life, show up to evening lectures. I mean, there's the thing about college, and the thing I miss about being on a college and university campus, there's something happening every day. There's a free lecture, there's a Q&A with a noted author, there's, you know, they're hiring a new faculty member and that person has to do a presentation. I mean, there's always something you can go to. Just go and find your people, find your community on campus. And again, that's not just for rural students, but for any student, I think it's important. So finding your community is so important because, and the research shows the students who don't stay in campus, who don't persist to graduation, often they're more on their own. They haven't found anything that has got them to stick to campus. So that's one thing. And then also, and I recognize how hard this is before I say it, especially being a first-gen student, ask questions, just ask for help. And again, I know that's hard. It took me till junior year to feel comfortable. And that was only because my girlfriend at the time came from the opposite of first-gen family. Everyone in her family had bachelor's and master's degrees and MBAs and stuff. She coaxed me and taught me how to ask for help. And it was the most incredible feeling when I finally asked a professor for additional help and they gave it to me. I was like, oh my God, I didn't know you would do that. You know, faculty members, instructors are intimidating. We call them doctor and they've got all these letters after their name and they write books. They're people. And at the end of the day, they're there for you. You are the customer at college. And so you need to, if you need help, if you need guidance, if you need clarification, you need to ask for that help and find where the help is on campus. So like Maria and Jadine said, tutoring center, success center, a trio office, or again, your RA, just find someone who can help you and continue to ask those questions. That's the only way you're going to find the answers. So just begin flexing those skills as early as you can.
Thanks. Yeah, the customer piece is interesting because it's changed. I was thinking maybe when Maria and I went to college at that time, maybe not you too, but it was, you kind of just got dropped off and I remember my dad's like, good luck, you know, and there wasn't a lot of support, but over the years, as you all know, in higher ed, we were helping kids move in at UEM on move-in day. Maybe that's too much. Well, yeah, but it's, but yeah, anybody you need for anything, academics, right? All those things, there was somebody there. 4 kids of my own, and I would say each one was shy, one wasn't, one didn't ask for help more, one did. They all had really different experiences. And I think that those are great points, that there are people there and you kind of got to get used to figuring out how to ask for help a little bit. Let me back it up just a little bit. We have at CFES, we work on what we call essential skills, which kind of soft skills, most people know them as, like perseverance, agility, things like that. And it's easy to talk about them. It's like, you know, just, hey, you need to persevere when you get to college and hang in there, you know. But how they do that, I think, is obviously different than just saying, you know, suck it up and be hard. So any tips you'd have on that? But just before that, I would say that let's say we have a number of students who are on the fence about going to college. And with the price tag today, there's a number of reasons that it's become a lot different. And, you know, for daunting for a lot of families, to Matt's point about financial aid. I think once you dig into it and see that it's a sticker shock isn't quite what you think it is, and there are a lot of scholarships, still, it's a major decision. Well, any advice you'd have for a student that's on the fence that, you know, really probably would thrive in college, but just is worth, you know, maybe they have family members back home, they're thinking short term, my family needs help back home, I can't do that without thinking like, you know, hey, I get a degree and then I could potentially really help them. Just any advice any of you might have for a student senior year right now, just thinking I'm really close, but I'm not sure.
I think it's important to find those people who can help you go through your options, because, you know, I understand fully that college is expensive. My son is actually, you know, doing campus tours today and tomorrow. it is expensive to go to college, but what we're seeing, depending on what state you're from, some of the community college systems are amazing. So that's an option where you can get a 2-year degree, and some community colleges actually have an agreement that if you are able to complete the associate's degree there, then you might automatically be admitted into a 4-year institution. I know at Boston University, they call them articulation agreements. And so there are various scholarships for students coming from some of the local Boston community colleges if they pursue a 2-year degree. So look at all of those different options. It is expensive, but I think, sometimes people get in their minds too, it's only worth it if I can go to a Yale or a Princeton or a Harvard. Well, there are lots of other schools that may be much more affordable to you that are nearby to your home. And so I guess it's just one of those things to really, and I think that's what you all do with Brilliant Pathways, is that you're connecting with students to help kind of work through some of those challenges that they might face in making a decision. But I promise you, if you put your full self into the college experience, it will open up a world to you. I used to think my world was my little town. And once I left, and once I even left Vermont, I'm like, oh my goodness, there's a whole world out there for me to discover. And none of these opportunities would have come to me if I had just stayed in my own little hometown. And I understand it about families needing assistance. I work with many students whose families, rely on them for childcare. If parents need to go to work, childcare needs to be given or provided, part-time jobs to help with expenses in the home. It is a big investment for the whole family. And so I think we're going to start to see more of a movement by colleges and universities really trying to embrace the families as well. And how can we help make this experience a better one for the whole family unit, and not just, we're as though we're taking a student away from their home and their family of origin, but rather how can we collaborate together so that everybody can move together because by you pursuing a bachelor's degree will transform your family's generation. And that's what it really, really does. It transforms your family in ways you might not have ever imagined, and transform in a positive way. So I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, that's well said.
And John, can I add something onto that real quick?
Please.
Yeah, thank you. Because I absolutely agree with Maria. And one thing I would add is also, because she brought up the idea of community college, and I agree, so many community colleges are amazing. And if there's one nearby, that's a great way to also test out college. It's much less expensive. You can still get federal aid, grants and loans, and possibly scholarships for it. But some of it is so much. We position college as it's something you do with both feet right after high school, and you go for 4 years and you graduate. And Maria, you may know, or JD, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the number of, or the percentage of students who are doing the typical 4-year, they go to college right after high school, between 18 and 22, they graduate in 4 years, they go off to start a career. I think it's something like less than 25% of all enrolled college students. It is insanely low. So the picture that I fell in love with of all the movies and TV shows, that's less than a quarter of the college experience. Go expand the definition of a college experience. Take a couple classes at a community college and then maybe transfer, or stick with a community college for a couple of years until you built up your confidence, then transfer or get your associates, and then you can find a career. So don't think everything is I have to decide at 18 years old what I'm doing, and it's only going to be for 4 years and then I'm done. Because there are other ways to have a college experience and still have a successful, fulfilling life later on.
Agreed. And I just want to say, you can take one class, after you graduate, you can still get the full-time job and help your family and just see what it's like, and if you enjoy it or not, and maybe try 2 classes the next semester, maybe then a full, go take part-time job and go to school part-time. You can make it work for you and then figure it out what it is you want. But the community college pathway is really amazing because you save so much money, and you can easily transfer to a 4-year school after you get your associates. And then you can have 2 degrees that go on your resume later on, and you just have backup plans, because you can't really depend on your employer, but you can depend on a degree. like, you can get another job elsewhere. So it just gives you some safety later on in life, and you're not going to regret it.
Yeah. There's so many pathways. You talk to people, and like one of my sons is, he's like 28, he's still going. Another one, 4 years, whatever works. I do think sometimes, we talk about all the obstacles and like it's really hard, and it is. But then there's also, you talk to people that graduated in 4 years and like had a really good time. It's not always like, it's like you've got to focus on this major and grind it out, and which is all true. But you also have, there's a lot of fun, right? There's a lot of social activities. I told a kid the other day, he's like, I have 8 classes a day. Am I going to have 12 in college? I'm like, no, you're going to have 2 or 3. He's like, what? So it's like just stuff they don't. And then we had an 8th grader who was like, he was visiting Champlain on a tour, and he said, I want to go here. Like, what do I have to do? He goes, I think my grade's too late. And I said, you're starting your next year when you're a freshman. It starts then. Like, nothing you've done in the past will go against you. And he was like, oh, I didn't know, so it was like this whole, just things they don't, they might not think about, and that kind of enlightens them to move on. I'd be curious to see, the last 2 years have been tough, for really tough for a lot of students. Are there some things that have changed in the past few years, or any advice that, I know it's just been a real struggle for a lot of students, and they've gone, virtually, and there's been some social, emotional learning issues. If in some schools still are virtual, how are you dealing with that at your schools? And is there any advice for students that might be coming into it?
Yeah, so we have been back in person in the fall. So I think similarly with many of the other colleges and universities in the country, they shut down in March of 2020. And so only now have we started meeting again in person. Everybody's masked up here at BU, but we're meeting in person. I think what I've seen and what's exciting for the future students, I think especially for high schoolers coming up through, like you've experienced being in your room. If you had to do remote learning, like just sitting in your room all day, or sitting in your kitchen or in some space all day, taking your classes online. And what I've seen is the students who now, like the sophomores, the second year students, they didn't even experience their first year last year. They have a whole weekend set up this weekend here at BU, where it's the class of 2024, where they have a whole bunch of super fun social activities, where they're doing roller skating, and they're doing a mini golf tournament, and all these other great activities. And what I've heard from my sophomores is that they're like, oh my goodness, I'm going to take advantage of everything, because I hated sitting in my room last year taking my classes. I'm gonna make make this really matter this year because of how much I missed last year. And I hope that high school students will also carry that with them of, we missed a lot in our high school years, but we sure can make it up when we're in college. And colleges and universities have so much for you to do on campus. And that's what I actually love, being back on a large, like I'm on an urban campus now, like we're right in the middle of Boston. But with COVID, so much had to stop. But what I love is that, like, oh, exciting. There's some art exhibits coming. There's some concerts. I can't wait to go see a play that the students are doing. Can't wait to go to a hockey game. So you can have quite a social life. I'm looking forward to having a social life as a staff member. I'm just really engaging in the campus community. And so I encourage students to do that. That's really, really important. But I see a renewed sense of students wanting to be in person again, and to connect in person with one another.
We're having the same thing going on here at UVM. Our students are very excited to be back in person. Last year we were hybrid, so we had students who lived on campus but took their classes in their room for the most part. And then we also had students, gave them the option to stay at home, and they got a bit of a discount to live at home and take classes virtually. But most of our students took their classes in bed, and they struggled. Grades were hard. We saw a lot of students like just lose financial aid because their grades went down so bad, or they didn't know when to withdraw, or like how to just deal with all of it. And their mental health was impacted as well. And then they couldn't do counseling like they normally would because their family was in the same room as them. They had no privacy and no space. And now our students are here and very excited to explore life on campus and figure out who they are, because that's part of college, is like figuring out who you are as a person without your family on top of you. Like you're really just independent and getting to do it on your own and figuring out like who am I? What do I like? What's important to me? Ask those big meaning making questions. And this is the time to do it. So I'm very glad to see things are changing, although we are very much still in COVID. But we know now how to be in COVID and do it safely. And so, yeah, I'm excited to see how the semester progresses with a full campus. Our campus is more packed than it's ever been, actually.
Yeah, I was in Burlington recently. It felt pretty tight. Yeah. Matt, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I was just gonna say I think one of the few quote unquote good things that has come out of COVID in terms of college is the recognizing that online learning can be just as effective and productive as sitting in a classroom. So I was excited. So that was actually the focus of my doctoral research, was online learning and challenges in higher education. And so even before COVID, I was very interested in this, and I was very excited to see more and more of the name schools, the Harvards, the Boston Universities, University of Chicago's, embracing online education, because I think that's a modality we don't talk about nearly enough, even though it's prevalent. I got my doctorate 100% online, and it was an amazing program. And I loved it beginning to end. And I feel as prepared as any of my colleagues that also have letters after their names, And so for any students, don't, as we were talking about earlier with exploring community colleges in 4 years and transferring, don't discount doing online learning. It has inherent challenges. You have to be very disciplined and responsible, but again, like Jadine said, sample a class, do one class. If you have reliable internet at home and you have family responsibilities, you have to take care of little siblings or grandma, take a class at home and do it on your own time and kind of see what college is like. But for me, that this has been a game changer, because online education opens up access, and I think we need to get to universal access for higher education. I think this is one more way to break down barriers. So I've been happy to see, especially faculty, have sort of been moving over to that style of learning, and I think that's only going to help us going forward.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's interesting. We've had students, some have really thrived in it. They preferred, just maybe they would describe themselves maybe as a little shyer, and they in the classroom was a little intimidating, and they really thrived online. In other cases, vice versa. But the access issue for certain, for sure in our rural schools has been the digital divide, and hopefully that's becoming, where they can get more access, which kind of is could segue to this one question from student Mariah Central School, which is in the Adirondacks. What about commuter students from rural areas? It's harder to find community when you don't live on campus. What advice do you have for commuters?
Actually, if it's okay, I'll jump in on that, just because I saw this question come in and I've been thinking about it. So I worked at University of Missouri St. Louis for about 3 years in the financial aid office, and that is a commuter school. There's only 2 dorms, I think, on campus, 2 residence halls, and then some apartment living. Very, very commuter for St. Louis and the surrounding rural counties to come into campus. So we struggle with that all of the time. I think it goes back to finding, if not a community, some sense of connection to the campus. Maybe you just start going to sporting events and you get really into that. Maybe you get really involved in the student symphony or student orchestra. I mean, again, it kind of goes back to finding your people, finding your place on campus. And if it's not a social piece, then just exhaust all of the academic options on campus. Make sure you visit tutoring. Make sure you check out the student identity groups. Just try to find that community and make it possible. And don't discount starting your own organization. You can start a student group on campus. So if you're looking for other commuter students to connect with, start a commuter student group, or a Facebook, or sorry, I said Facebook, I should say Instagram or TikTok community, whatever you use. And just create it yourself if no one else is doing it.
Yeah. One thing I wanted to also touch on, we have a lot of students, some rural students particularly, that would go to a larger campus and feel like, we sort of talk about imposter syndrome and, not feeling less than, and I'm not picking on prep school kids necessarily, but some of the kids were a little rough on some of the, rural kids. They just weren't used to that way of life. And any advice you have, because Jadine, you touched on earlier. I mean, you got in, like you belong there. Now, everybody, I think most people would say when they first got to campus, they were intimidated. I don't care who you are. It takes a little bit like, do I belong here? Can I make this happen? And then you get there sophomore or junior and you're thriving if you make it that far. But what any advice for like, it's so hard because, if you feel intimidated or you feel like I don't belong. How do you get over that to get to the point where you do feel like you do belong and then you thrive?
I'd say like take advantage of counseling resources. That's ever the first place to talk to someone, confide in them about your feelings so that they can affirm you and say like, I understand what you're talking about, but I also want you to know this is your place. So like sometimes you really just need to hear somebody from that university or college community saying like, you do belong here, you're part of us. And then like make friends. And I know that's hard, but like if you can make friends, then like that will help you feel like you're connected. Like on a personal level to the school and to the community. And then, yeah, sign up for clubs, like really like get yourself out there because that's a way to make it just feel less intimidating. And then if you are struggling, like go to the tutoring, go sign up for extra help, get that support so that you don't feel like I'm too dumb to be here. Like, what this goes through your mind, like, I can't handle this. Like everybody else in my class is so smart. Like stop comparing yourself to them, focus on yourself. Like we all had different experiences. Some people had like college prep classes and they were like super prepared, while others, their schools were struggling high schools. You're going to go to school and you're going to struggle yourself. But know that there is support. I'm sure every single college has support like that available to you. And create a study group if you need that as well. Like make friends with people in your classes so that like you can sit next to somebody every day, exchange notes, study together, and that will help you feel more comfortable.
Yeah, because some kids are more. I'm not, when I mentioned prep school kids, I mean, some of them did a fifth year. They're just, I didn't mean they picked on, they're more academically kind of confident. But a kid like for Jen's, you think about it, Maria, you went to UNH and you were salutatorian and yet you struggled. So it's like, oh my God, I don't belong here. I'm not going to cut it. But you somehow persevered. How did you, or how do you tell kids that are thinking they don't belong to get them to the next year?
I think the most important thing to realize is that even though you may think everybody else has it together, they don't. Everybody thinks that about everybody else. Everyone does. And one of the things, and I find this with students when I used to meet with students in the Mosaic Center, now the Mosaic Center, I would meet with students just to be that listening ear and provide advice and counsel them. And I would know of these particular friend groups. They'd come in like one after another. I'm so alone. I'm so alone. I have nobody. I'm like, what are you talking about? Like, I see you with this group of people, and it would typically be 5 or 6 people, and they were always hanging out together, and they would say, I feel so alone. And I'm like, with your permission, may I let them know that you're also feeling the same way? And I would do that with each one of them. And they all looked at each other and they're like, ah. Like, sometimes you just don't want to be vulnerable or open up about that information that you don't know everything, and that's okay. I think as first gens, we don't know what we don't know. And so we have no barometer, we have no compass or comparison point. They're like, you're establishing your baseline. So we have nothing to compare it to, except we do compare to ourselves to other people, which is really not a good thing to do, as Jadine said. So, it really is important to, just remember that, like, everybody doesn't have it together. I promise you, they do not have it together. I have students who are like, sometimes I have a student now, she's on her way to becoming, she's applying to Fulbright, all these big prestigious fellowships for her to go to graduate school. And she met with me and she's like, I'm doing an internship in the mayor's office in Boston. I have imposter syndrome. Everybody else knows more than me. I'm like, I'm pretty sure they don't all know more than you. So, but she just had to articulate that. And so that's why it's also important to find your people on campus to at least verbalize it. So once she got that out of her system, and then she was able to go another few days in her internship, she's like, I feel better. It's good. You know, like I'm all right. I said, I knew you would be, but you just need to be able to talk with people about that. So that's why it's key to find not only your peers, but also those people in those offices across campus who will sit and listen to you. You need to find your cheerleading squad on your campus. That's most important. And I tell the students here at the Newberry Center, I'm like, anytime you need a cheerleader, I'm here for you. So we will celebrate. We'll sit. If you need to cry, you can cry here, but we will celebrate all of the good things that you do too.
That's awesome. Yeah, you know, we have corporate partners, and we've talked, I mean, CEOs of major companies, and they're like, they would get a raise, they'd get moved up into a higher position, and then a higher and higher every time. One of them said, who's head of it, CFO of AT&T and Time Warner. He said, every time I didn't think I was ready, he'd call his brother and say, I don't think I should take this. I'm not ready. He says, no, you fake it till you make it. No one knows what they're doing. He did it, and they kept all the way up. And it's just, sometimes you need somebody else to tell you, like, no, you got it, or you're as good as anybody else, you know, which you all do. So it's a huge role that you play. I'm gonna be cautious of time. I'd love to finish up. JD, I'm thinking of Lasana Drame. So any students of inspiration or any experience you've had with a student that has moved you, or you saw the student be successful, love it if you share it. Lasana came from a New York City school, came to UVM, first gen, and got through that first year. He's a chemical engineer, I think, but he took it upon himself. Every kid that came from his high school that came to UVM, he mentored them. Not just academically, he helped them get through. I mean, I choked up thinking about it. I mean, he's helped so many kids there on his own. Just, you know, once he realized, hey, I belong here, you do too, you're coming from my same high school. And then he showed them how to do it. So any stories you have of kids that have persevered through somehow, we'd love to hear them and close it up.
I feel like there's too many to think of a specific
Yeah.
student, but I see the story a lot of students who come to me and they are in academic probation, they're on financial aid probation, they're about to get kicked out because their grades are so poor, and then like I am their last stop, and they're hoping that maybe like I might be able to help them because I sent them an email saying, so I saw your grades go down, you want to talk about this? And then like after talking and then figuring out what their issues were, like, you know, not talking to their faculty or just like not having good study skills, like helping them get the resources they need on campus. So then they slowly start working up to it and figuring things out. And so like, I just love watching them like grow into these adults. So they start off and they're just like so lost. And then, you know, I'm seeing them turn into president club leaders, and they're doing these amazing things, internships and studying abroad. And then they graduate and they go into grad school. And then I see them in grad school and graduating from there. And then like, I know them now as alumni, and they have these fabulous jobs and making tons of money. And you just see like their life had how much it changed when they were like, I'm about to give up. I'm going to get kicked out. Why even bother anymore? I stopped going to class. I stopped doing my homework. I'm done. And then for me to be like, no. I'm like, please, like continue. Just keep giving it a few more weeks. Like, let's not give up. And then to see when their life changes, because like just something clicks. And it was really just talking about it and me just saying, this is how you schedule a tutoring session. This is how you like, you know, just take care of these really basic things that they felt overwhelmed by. But by talking to somebody like me, like I'm like, I easily know these resources. I'm so happy to share them with you. And then seeing them just flourish after that. Yeah, I have dozens of students in my head, really.
What a pivotal moment, you know. It's like you think of all the times where you come to this crossroads, and you know, unfortunately, sometimes some kids do go home and it doesn't. But I mean, all the decisions and things that happen in your life, you think about these key moments where you're like, I'm going to do this, I'm not going to. Somebody like you helps you, and it usually is a person, right? They inspire you, and they get you. No, you can do this. Whereas it could easily go the other way, and it does sometimes. And I know that's your work, is you all are working to make it, you know, everybody get through. So it's those little moments are so big. As you talk about when they flourish later, it's like, God, that's what happens. Yeah. Anybody else that wants to chime in? Maria, I don't know if you've had any. Well, you've been to a
I was
lot.
waiting to see if Matt was going to make a move. I was going to let Matt go if he wanted to. So for me, I've been in higher education and student affairs for almost 30 years. So the number of students has just been incredible to me. And, I remember these moments of sitting with students in my offices, just saying to them, I see you walking across the stage. And there have been moments of despair for some of these students where, in some cases where I literally did not know if they would continue on with their life. I mean, that's how much in despair it would get for some students. But just being there to say, you have people behind you. You don't have to do this alone. It's exactly what Jadine says in terms of seeing all of these students. Like now, I'm seeing them with their families. Some of the students that I recruited when I was first in admissions, I'm like, oh, good grief, you're only like 3 or 4 years behind me. Like I forget, I think that they're still a college student, and I forget, oh, you're in your late 40s, like you are getting older. But for them to have their own families, to see them have their successful businesses and jobs, and just see where the world has taken them. And it was all because of their education, because they stuck with it. And it's hard. I know it's really, really hard. It is not easy to get through, but I always tell students to just really try to think as much as you can into the future. It's hard to imagine, but you will get there. And for me, the greatest reward is seeing all of the alums, as grown people pursuing masters and doctorates when they thought they might never have continued on past college, to have families, to just have full, vibrant lives. And that's what's most important to me. So yeah, thanks.
Yeah, and I'll say, for me, it was actually, and this might be a little bit cheating, my youngest brother, he's about 6 or 7 years younger than me. And so I was fully established in my career when he started looking at colleges, and he played baseball in high school. So he went to community college. I was going to pay him to play baseball. Then he fell in love with turf management. So like working with grounds and athletic fields and things like that. And I was able to help him with his financial aid. I was able to help him transfer colleges. I was able to help him as he was trying to figure out his career and his major and stuff like that. And now he's the field manager for the Milwaukee Brewers, and originally he wanted to be a meteorologist, and it's just been so rewarding for me that I've been able to take my knowledge, my experience to help my youngest brother, who, if I hadn't gone to college, he may not have gone. He may not be in this amazing career that he's so passionate about now. And to me, that's really rewarding, but it also shows everyone takes a different path. I basically was at one university for 4 years. He went to 3 and a community college, but he's in this amazing job now. And to me, that's all that matters, is that you get to where you want to be and you can be successful. And for me, that's just always been something I've always been very proud of him for that.
Those are all great examples, that Matt, you helping him like that. I mean, and it could be anybody. I mean, we're training college and career readiness advisors, or just people in the community, just to give them a little bit of skills in terms of how to help a student. Could be a janitor. I mean, I've talked to people who have been inspired by people from all walks of life, but the work you're all doing is like really significant in this space. Your counterparts all across the country are changing lives. And we really appreciate you sharing your experiences. And I know if we have students that have questions, I can have them reach out if that's okay. And and then we'll look forward to working with y'all in the future and continuing all this good work. It's hard, it's never ending, but it's, as I can tell from all of you, it's incredibly rewarding. So thank you so much for coming on.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for having us.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, we'll talk soon. Thanks again. Bye.
Bye.